The rain had just begun when Daniel pulled his old pickup into the dimly lit gas station on the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the cracked pavement. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. His shift at the auto shop had been longer than expected, and all he wanted now was to get his little girl home, tucked into bed. But the fuel gauge was dipping dangerously low, and the last thing he needed was to be stranded on some dark back road with a 5-year-old asleep in the back seat. As he stepped out, the cold wind bit at his skin. He pulled his jacket tighter and started pumping gas, the rhythmic click of the nozzle echoing in the quiet night. That was when he noticed her. She was sitting on the curb near the vending machines, knees pulled close to her chest, her hair damp from the drizzle. Her coat wasn't zipped, and one hand pressed against her rounded belly as though she were holding herself together. Her shoulders shook with each sob, but she didn't make a sound. Daniel froze for a moment. He wasn't the type to get involved in strangers' business. Life had taught him that. Ever since his wife had passed away 3 years ago, his focus had narrowed to one thing: raising Emma. Work, sleep, take care of his daughter. Repeat. He didn't have time for detours, for complications. Still, something in the way the girl's tears cut through the glow of the flickering lights pulled at him. He recognized that look, the one of someone trying desperately not to fall apart in public. "Daddy, who's that?" a small voice mumbled from the truck. Emma's sleepy eyes peeked out from under her pink blanket. She had noticed too. Daniel gave her a reassuring smile. "Just someone who's having a hard night, sweetheart," he said gently. He debated for a second. He could finish fueling up, drive off, and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But as he glanced back at the girl, shivering and wiping her face with the back of her sleeve, he knew he couldn't. Maybe it was because Emma was watching, and he wanted his daughter to learn kindness. Maybe it was because once, not too long ago, he had been the one sitting broken on a curb, with no one there to ask if he was okay. Leaving the pump, he walked slowly toward her. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "You okay out here?" The girl flinched, her head snapping up. For a second, her eyes startlingly green, even under the dim light locked on his. She looked like she was deciding whether to run. "Yeah, I'm fine," she stammered, quickly wiping her cheeks. "Just waiting for someone." Daniel raised an eyebrow. He had been around long enough to recognize a lie. "All right," he said, not pushing. He glanced at her thin coat, damp with rain. "Look, I don't mean to intrude, but it's cold. If you need a warm place to sit for a bit, you can come wait in the truck. My daughter's in there, safe as it gets." She hesitated. Her hand rested protectively over her belly again. He noticed the tremor in her fingers. "I shouldn't," she murmured. "That's fair," Daniel replied, his tone calm. "But the offer stands." He turned to walk back, giving her space to decide. He didn't expect her to follow. But when he opened the driver's side door, he heard footsteps behind him. "Is Ida Broken Bar okay if I sit for a minute?" she asked quietly, almost embarrassed. "Of course." He motioned toward the passenger side. "Go ahead." Emma's eyes lit up when the woman climbed in, carefully lowering herself into the seat. "Hi," Emma said brightly, her voice full of curiosity. The woman smiled faintly, the kind of smile that was more reflex than joy. "Hi, this is Emma," Daniel said as he slid behind the wheel. "I'm Daniel." "Claire," the woman whispered. Her voice cracked slightly as she said her name, and Daniel noticed the way she avoided eye contact, as though ashamed of her own presence. He cranked up the heater, letting the warm air fill the cab. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Emma yawned and snuggled into her blanket again. "Content." Claire exhaled, her breath shaky. "Thank you." "I didn't mean to." She stopped, biting her lip. "You don't have to explain," Daniel said. "Everyone hits rough nights." She looked at him then, really looked, as if trying to figure out what kind of man would sit with a stranger in a gas station parking lot without asking for anything in return. He wasn't dressed sharp. Grease-stained jeans, a jacket that had seen better days, but his eyes were steady, kind. "Do you live around here?" he asked casually, trying to keep the silence from turning heavy. Claire shook her head. "Number." "Just passing through." Daniel nodded, not pressing further. She clearly didn't want to share details, but he could see exhaustion carved into her features, the kind that went deeper than lack of sleep. Emma sat up suddenly. "Are you having a baby?" she asked, pointing innocently at Claire's belly. Daniel's eyes widened. It's okay, Claire said, a tiny laugh escaping her throat. It sounded rusty, like she hadn't laughed in weeks. Yes, I am. Emma's face lit up. I love babies. Daddy says I was the best baby ever. Daniel rubbed his forehead, embarrassed. She's not wrong. For the first time that night, Claire's expression softened. She reached over and brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. You're lucky, she said quietly, to have her. I know, Daniel replied, his voice low. There was a pause. Rain tapped against the windshield, steady and gentle. Claire shifted in her seat, as if the words she wanted to say were too heavy to carry. Finally, she whispered, I don't know what I'm going to do. Daniel glanced at her, but didn't ask questions. Sometimes people didn't need advice, just someone to listen. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, he said softly. Her eyes welled up again, tears spilling before she could stop them. She turned her face toward the window, ashamed. Daniel reached into the console and handed her a crumpled napkin from an old fast food run. Not much, but it's clean, he said. She accepted it with a shaky laugh, dabbing her eyes. You're broken bar kind. I didn't expect that tonight. I'm not always, Daniel admitted, but when I see someone hurting, I remember how it felt when no one stopped for me. Claire studied him then, curiosity flickering in her gaze. What happened? He hesitated. It wasn't something he usually shared, but the quiet of the cab, the anonymity of the moment, made it easier. My wife, he said slowly. She passed away 3 years ago. I didn't think I'd make it through some nights, but I had Emma. She kept me going. Claire's hand tightened around the napkin. I'm sorry, she murmured. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, Daniel said with a small shrug. But sometimes the detours bring you places you didn't expect. She looked down at her belly, her face unreadable. They sat in silence again. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. The hum of the heater, the patter of rain, Emma's quiet breathing had created a cocoon of warmth in the middle of an otherwise cold night. After a while, Daniel glanced at the clock. You have somewhere to go? Family, friends? Claire hesitated, then shook her head. Not tonight. Daniel frowned. The protective instinct that had kept his daughter safe for years stirred inside him again. He didn't know who this woman was, where she had come from, or why she was alone, but leaving her out here didn't feel right. There's a diner not far from here, he said. They're open all night. I was planning on grabbing some food for the road anyway. You're welcome to join us. Her lips parted as if to refuse, but then she caught Emma's sleepy smile. For some reason, she couldn't say a number. Okay, she whispered. Danielle started the truck, pulling away from the lonely gas station. Claire sat quietly, staring out the window, while Emma hummed softly in the backseat. For a brief moment, as the lights of the town grew nearer, Daniel wondered about the stranger who had stumbled into his night. What he didn't know was that Claire Harlow wasn't just a scared, pregnant girl with nowhere to go. She was one of the youngest, most powerful CEOs in the country, a woman whose face was splashed across magazines, whose decisions moved millions of dollars. But at that gas station, under the flickering neon, she had been just another human being, lost, vulnerable, desperate for kindness. And Daniel, unaware of the truth, had given it without hesitation. For Claire, that small act would become the first moment of light after months of darkness. And for Daniel, it was the beginning of a story he never saw coming.